Hi, I'm here with Justin Sinclair. How are you, Justin?
I'm doing really well, Leah.
So,
How are you?
Justin, I'm good. I'm good. Now, you wrote the very informative, very detailed, and very interesting chapter, Endocannabinoid system. Let's start with naturopathy first, and then we'll weave our way into the ECS and cannabis. How did naturopathy find you?
Um, that's a very good question. I started always being interested in plants when I was younger, basically because I was living out in nature and having the opportunity to spend a lot of time in there. But I didn't really understand how I could make that a profession. So it was probably uh, 16, 17, I started being interested in the environmental causes and things like that. So I went and studied a Bachelor of Science in Forestry down at ANU. And that was the botany and the dendrology and geology and all the things I really loved. But as soon as we started having to look at chopping down trees, that kind of ended it for me. So we ended up, as fate would have it, moving to the United States. And I ended up spending time with some Native American Indians over there, which was formative in changing my trajectory from that kind of environmental aspect to health and learning how they used herbal medicines. Of course, I was also very lucky when I was younger to be able to spend some time with our Indigenous Australians up north in Jabiru, just watching how familiar and comfortable they were in the land and knowing what they could eat, knowing what was dangerous. And that's always been an allure for me. So that's what got me into natural medicine.
Okay. And then, so because you've been in the profession for some time, how did cannabis find you and the interest in the plant? Because, I mean, if you speak to a herbalist, having a specific interest in a specific plant means something big happened or something called you. So what was it? How did it all unravel?
When I first moved over to the United States, was in a little town, well, not little, but a town in Northern California called Chico, and it's a college town. So needless to say, while I was working and traveling around adventuring there, cannabis was everywhere. It's a college town over there. And it's right on the outskirts of what they call the Emerald Triangle. So the counties there of Humboldt, Trinity, and Mendocino County is where a lot of the cannabis culture really started. A lot of the chemovars and varieties that we know today emerged from there. And so I had this opportunity to meet people, particularly patients that were using cannabis back, and this is going way back into the early 90s, very early 90s, that they were using cannabis to treat really serious conditions. And so that really started getting me interested in how this plant could actually do it. Obviously, everything that we'd been told about it, it was illicit, it's bad and dangerous. But the more I started reading about it, the more it changed my mind, and particularly just seeing what the plant could do. I think with people from everything from chronic pain, prolapse discs and that type of neuropathic pain, all the way out to chemotherapy induced nausea and vomiting as they're going through their chemo treatments. And I just was amazed that one plant could do so many things. And so that was when I started my journey down the rabbit hole.
And I remember when we spoke, because I think we were originally talking about CNM and your involvement in that text, and then we started talking about ACNM, and you pitched this to me. And I mean, I really had not much information, to be totally honest, about it at the time, but we talked it through. And then it was a fair amount of effort for me to get it approved with the publisher. But I mean, if you think about where that conversation was 6-7 years ago and where the knowledge around the endocannabinoid system is now, your knowledge, your experience, what you've done with the plant's access, and how many people are studying it, where do you see it heading now?
It's only going to get bigger and better, I think. I mean, the one thing that I'm really interested in, particularly with the chapter, was the endocannabinoid system in general. I mean, we at least for myself, I didn't get to study the endocannabinoid system that much. We touched on it very briefly in my master's at Sydney. But even today, I mean, nursing and medical curriculum don't really cover the endocannabinoid system in depth. And I understand that technically it's quite a recent scientific finding going back to the 80s and 90s, but one would think that adoption would happen a little bit faster. But the one area that I'm really excited in, apart from the research that I'm involved in, particularly around things like female health, endometriosis, etc., is just that our understanding of the endocannabinoid system, as we start to learn more, I honestly believe that it's going to start to open up a lot of these diseases that we just didn't know their etiology or pathogenesis. And as we start to see that neuromodulatory aspect, being involved with homeostasis and its receptors being distributed right throughout the body, central nervous system, peripheral nervous system, all of the immune cells, and just understanding it more, because we're still just tip of the iceberg. I honestly believe that we'll start getting answers for a lot of these diseases that still elude us.
Do you think we'll also get answers for other plants or for other mechanisms of actions from other drugs or other substances?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, the lion's share of research obviously has really only been done on delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, THC, and cannabidiol. But there's over 140 different cannabinoids that have been found in different chemotypes, chemovars, of the genus. And then there are other plants, of course, that also can work on the endocannabinoid system. It's not just all about cannabis, but cannabis certainly brought the endocannabinoid system into the spotlight, because until then we just didn't know anything about it.
Mm. And so where to from here for you personally, with respect to the system, the plant, anything else?
Well, I guess at the moment most of my research is being involved around cannabis. So I've been conducting, in this interesting time we find ourselves with the pandemic, I've been able to submit about 7 papers, mostly as a co-author. But looking at things like cannabis as an overview, cannabis for anxiety, cannabis in exercise performance, which was quite interesting. We've even delved into psychedelics a little bit with one of our visiting scholars at NICM, Professor Nicole Coelho. So we've done a systematic review and meta-analysis on classic serotonergic psychedelics. So that's under peer review at the moment. So lots of those types of activities. My own PhD is looking at the safety, tolerability, and effectiveness of medicinal cannabis for endometriosis. And I'm doing that in a mixed methods study, so that'll be ongoing for the next few years. But yeah, I mean, I've got projects where I'm a collaborator on that are looking at method development on canflavins. So the canflavins are a group of flavonoids found uniquely in cannabis. So we're looking at trying to be able to find and analyze those. Very interested in learning a little bit more about the synergy between cannabinoids and terpenes and terpenoids. So yeah, there's anything to do with cannabis I'm obviously interested in. Some are a little bit stronger than others, where my knowledge base is a little bit better. But there's just so much to learn about this plant. I mean, I've been studying it for 20 years, and I think I've mentioned in one of my talks that it's analogous to if Cannabis and I were dating, and it's been 20 years, I've probably got a kiss on the cheek, but I certainly haven't met the parents yet. And that's still how I feel. That's still how I feel today. There's just so much to learn. Very blessed in the environment that I'm in, surrounded by other academics and researchers at NICM, but also other institutions, clinicians, particularly medical doctors, specialists, who I both work with and mentor. The lobbying with government to try and get cannabis to where it is today, that's been a real journey, certainly one that I've learned a great deal of. And that's not just about lobbying for patient access, it's lobbying for the plant as well. I mean, it's to me, I think cannabis is one of those plants that I think will start to bridge the gap between medicine and what we do. And I think that's really important.
Beautiful. Well, it's certainly been a privilege to include it in the textbook. And I think that giving people the access and the understanding and your wisdom and connection to the plant has been really rewarding. And I know that people are going to be really inspired by it. So thank you.
Oh, thanks so much for the invitation to do it, simply because it's, I know how hard you had to push to get that through, because, back when we were discussing it all, it's still very conservative, and I know how much you did, and I greatly appreciate that.
You're most welcome. You're most welcome. Thank you so much, Justin.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks so much, Leah.